Few vans have ever been loved enough to last beyond their service life. This one is a rare survivor.
The vehicle is reputed to be the oldest motorised ice cream float in the world. It dates back to 1924. However, looking at the body it's sitting on at the moment, that's a 1930 Morris Cowley, and it started life in 1924 on an air-cooled Rover 8 body, and the ice cream float was built on the back of the body. But after 2 years of its working life, it was decided that the Rover 8 wasn't sufficiently powered to pull the ice cream and the float. So Arthur Hunter bought a Singer saloon and took off the cabin of the saloon and replaced the back of the ice cream float as you see it today and put that on the back of the Singer saloon. And he ran with that for another 10 years. And then in 1936 he decided to chop up a Morris Cowley. It was in fact a two-door sports Morris Cowley. And he took the back off that and replaced the back of the ice cream float as you see it today and transferred that to the Morris Cowley. And it then did another 30 years service on the Morris Cowley body.
The patch-up and make-do life of this van is typical of many early delivery vehicles. It all started at the end of the First World War. During the war, lorries progressed from unreliable overweight experiments to dependable trucks. For service to king and country, demobbed soldiers were rewarded with bleak employment prospects. Jobs were scarce. But there were plenty of ex-army trucks. Many were snapped up by war veterans, eager to make a living from their newfound driving skills. While they were all right on the open road, army lorries were too big and clumsy for use in small towns. This was the only competition for war surplus trucks, the Ford Model T. Though assembled in Manchester since 1911, originally it had been designed for America's farmers. Ground clearance was high to avoid chassis damage on unmade roads. The suspension was robust to withstand the battering from ruts, boulders and deep mud. By contrast, the abuse a British greengrocer could throw at it was insignificant. The T was an ideal commercial vehicle, easy to drive, simple to maintain, and above all, cheap. With a variety of utility bodies on offer, the ubiquitous T had the van market to itself. Until 1924.
Hello.
Hello, dear. Had a good day?
Yes, rather. I say, I wish you'd been with me. I've been to Cowley. You know, where they make Morris cars. Most awfully interesting.
Tell us all about it. This time before dinner.
Yes, Daddy, do.
It is a marvellous scene of beautifully organised industrial activity. There is no sense of rush or bustle. Every man seems to have plenty of time to do what he has to do. There is nothing skimped, and as a result, the quality of the work as well as the quantity turned out is extraordinarily good.
With the emphasis firmly off anything as vulgar as quantity, Morris clearly appealed to the genteel values of middle-class England. Like Ford's T, cars and vans were built using a common chassis, so Morris was able to offer the first British-designed competitor to America's industrial giant.
This van is a bull-nosed Morris Cowley, built in 1924, and was an early attempt by William Morris to have a traveller's representatives van. As you can see, it's a bit on the small side. And this is one of the reasons why it wasn't very successful, because there was very little space inside. I think it's rather individual. It set everybody thinking, I think, of a market for commercial light vehicles.
The working life of this commercial traveller's van started when only one household in 50 owned a car. Home delivery from high street shops created a need for a really light general tradesman's van that would never be expected to travel much beyond the parish boundary. The little Austin 7 was the perfect answer. Launched in 1923, it was again based on a car. The highly reliable Baby 7 boasted such mod cons as electric starting and brakes on all four wheels. In Britain's carless suburbs, door-to-door delivery was an essential service. The high street van became a competitive business asset, and traders without one found themselves at a disadvantage. Towns and villages near these suburbs expanded and benefited from this small boom in domestic trade to the well-off. During the Depression in the early 30s, these cheap-to-run light delivery vans flourished. The little Austin was joined by other car-based rivals like the first Morris Minor. This one was built in 1932. Ford's Y-Type was a commercial version of their appropriately named popular saloon car. The cheapest of the lot, at least in terms of running costs, were three-wheel light parcel vans based not on car technology but motorcycles. This 1934 Rally was powered by a V-twin engine which thumped away inside the cab with the driver. Not exactly works of art in themselves, many vans were beautifully liveried with hand-painted sign writing.
These are the tools of the trade. That is a maul stick, commonly called by sign writers a rest stick. And that is a pallet board with dippers. And these are the brushes. In days gone by, most vans were sign written. People used to like to advertise their shops and their produce and so forth. When I started work on my own, I wrote a van, and they wanted a swan, and it was called Swan Farm Dairy, Great Brockenhurst Farm, Lye. And I got the chance to do all the milk marketing board, including some yoghurt vans. Really, it's just hand skill and knowing brushes and the paint to use. I did this van. It was a woman holding up curtains out of a washing machine, and the caption was "Dye it in your washing machine." The first one I done, the woman might resemble somebody, and they were a bit afraid of that, so they gave me a drawing of a Mrs. Woodentop, and I altered it. Well, I think I preferred the original one to the Mrs. Woodentop, but they wanted Mrs. Woodentop, so that's what it had to be.
To really cut a dash, the van itself could be transformed into the shape of a product. Traders went to amazing lengths in their quest for publicity.
I can remember one of the laundry companies, Collars, they used to have a special streamline body on their vehicles. Very attractive, very eye-catching, and it stuck in your mind. It was a very good advert. Then there was McLean's toothpaste. In fact, I've got an example of one here, actually. Now, just look at that. And that was an actual van. The driver sat there, And of course the goods went in the back, but it was attractive, it was eye-catching, and people looked at it. And I suppose in those days it was just as good as a television advert today.
The England's Glory Match Company exploited the arts of sign writing and coach building in the extreme. They built and decorated the world's smallest Austin 7 for their 3-foot 10-inch driver. In contrast to this flamboyance was the restrained dignity of the red and black livery of the Post Office. Unlike other traders, the Post Office ordered its vans in bulk. It had fleets of identical vehicles. Today, hidden away in a disused aircraft hangar, are the few precious survivors of those vast fleets. These are direct descendants of the 18th century mail coaches. The scarlet and gold, a legacy from the royal founders and their ex-military coachmen. Beneath the dignified paint, mail vans have always been standard production models beefed up by post office coach builders for security. So post office vans have tough teak floors, cab-operated locking bars and fire extinguishers, not for the van, but for the mail bags. Despite the growth of trucks, railways remained the arteries of the nation. Mail, like other freight, always went long distance by train. To collect from sidings, a special type of truck was needed. Not a van, but a tug to pull carts. Unique three-wheeled articulated vehicles like this 1936 Scamell were developed for the four major rail companies. Called the mechanical horse, it would have its heyday in a new socialist Britain that emerged from the Second World War.
Right, come on. Left hand down a little.
This is the post-war version of the mechanical horse in the new nationalised livery of British Railways. It was called a scarab, after the best of lorries, Scamell, and the best of horses, Arab.
These vehicles really replaced the animal. They replaced the horse. You could couple this up to any trailer. You'd get one of these, it'd go off out and do general deliveries, and while it was away, there'd be loaders in a railway depot. They'd be loading other trailers, perhaps one with animal skins, another one with bales of hops, and then when the vehicle come back, you dropped your empty trailer off in the yard, and you'd go to the office, you'd get your delivery notes, and you'd say, go and pick that load of animal skins up on trailer, whatever the number was, and deliver that to Bermondsey.
Today, British Railways have a fleet of some 10,000 tractors and 29,000 trailers, a proportion of approximately 3 to 1. One Scamell Scarab with 2 or more trailers can often carry out the work of 2 or more rigid vehicles with consequent savings in outlay and operating costs.
The success of the mechanical horse was in its manoeuvrability and its clever coupling mechanisms.
Uncoupling from one trailer and coupling to another has become a matter of seconds. The mechanical horse is reversed so that the ramps on the rear of the chassis engage with the flanged wheels on the undercarriage or trailer portion of the coupling gear. As connection is made, notice how, as the ramps are inclined, continual reversing raises the front end of the trailer. At the same time, the trailer brakes and rear lights are automatically engaged, and the trailer is thus securely locked in position. The driver will tell you it's simplicity itself. Nothing to it.
That was a very low geared vehicle, very noisy I might add. You know, it could always do in another gear. It was very manoeuvrable. That was all right if the trailer brakes were working efficiently, which half the time they wasn't. I would think in its time you'd got to say it was a good sturdy mechanical horse. But it's nice to be back in one, even though it was a bit uncomfortable.
After nationalising the railways, the new Labour government honoured its pledge to do the same with road transport. They met vigorous opposition from the Road Haulage Federation, who ridiculed the idea of a bureaucratic central control.
No food, no houses, no coal, but millions of forms to fill hundreds of offices with thousands of civil servants to fill in millions more forms. That is government control.
I am commanded by the Commissioner to refer to your application for one spare sparking plug. And I am instructed to inform you that you have omitted to complete form number 36...
But despite these protests, the nationalised British Road Services was born.
Well, the days when I learned to drive, I was only 11 at a time. We didn't have the luxuries of self-starters and things like that. We didn't even have a windscreen. But the vehicles gradually progressed, and I started driving 1936, 37.
Dick Peters' garage, with its spare parts and red-painted tools, is a shrine to the time he spent with the state-owned British Road Services.
You nearly always, say 80% of the time, had your own vehicle. And of course the result was that people used to look after them. If I can diverge from it, a colleague of mine, he'd go and have his evening meal when he'd parked up, and then he'd come out and hose and polish the vehicle down in his own time. That's the kind of enthusiasm the job produced. Men loved their vehicles. Well, it's a 1947, and it just predates the batch bought by BRS Parcels for workshops runabouts. They were bought as workshop hacks. The idea being, of course, that if anybody with a 5-ton vehicle on C&D work, collection and delivery work in the narrow city streets, had a minor breakdown, petrol blockage or something silly like that, and instead of sending a 10-ton breakdown out to deal with that, they'd send one of these out with a trolley jack and a spare wheel and a set of tools and a few spare carburetor, spare dynamo and that kind of thing, to get whoever was stuck out of trouble. All the driving has given me far more pleasure than what it ever has misery. There's been moments, of course, of distress. Who doubts that? Foggy nights, deep snow and things like that, things we don't very often get nowadays, all added to it. But it was recompensed by the sheer joy of being your own governor. Once you got out on the road from the firm with a load of goods to deliver, it was your responsibility and yours alone to make sure they got there safe and sound, on time if possible, and then you found a return load and came back with it, and that was another round journey completed safely, and it was a lovely feeling of elation to know you'd done a good job satisfactorily.
There were exceptions to socialist uniformity. Small high street traders delivering their own goods locally escaped state control. All vehicles, including vans, were in short supply in the late 40s. Most were pre-war designs, like this 1940 Austin 8 model. Or the weird Trojan with its twin-cylinder two-stroke engine. The Jowett Bradford's design dated back to the early 1920s and was considered old-fashioned even then. Morris caused a ripple of excitement in 1949 with the release of this J model, with pressed steel panels, sliding doors and space-efficient one-box shape, it at least looked like a genuinely new idea.
Although a lot of people liked them, it gave a lot of drivers terrific back trouble for the reason that there was a fully forward control effort. In other words, there was a tin front and a windscreen, but the engine was in the cab between the seats. And the consequence of that was that if you kept the tyres at proper pressure, it's just like riding on two solid tyres up front. You've got every jolt. And there was only a very thin seat to sit on, sort of thing, which didn't help matters at all. So for that reason, they weren't at all popular, although actually there was a quite reliable little vehicle. They gave very little trouble as such.
The trouble was that beneath the delightful sculpted curves of the Morris J lurked a primitive chassis from the 30s. British van design was stagnant. As with the Ford Model T, again it was the Americans who showed the way forward. In 1952, the British branch of General Motors produced a completely new type of van, the Bedford CA.
The history of the CA van is probably unique in as much that it was designed as a van rather than an adapted car. It was revolutionary, using large pressed steel panels, larger than had previously been used, all steel construction, no wooden framing as the 40s vehicles had been, and a good engine, reliable, very strong, true-to-form chassis. A vehicle like this could be used for all sorts of other variations. When the CA van was introduced in 1952, it had no indicators, it had no sliding windows, therefore the driver had to open the door and do hand signals. Even the passenger seat was an optional extra. The reason so few survive, I think, is because it's a commercial vehicle. If you've driven a van, you'll know that you don't treat a van with respect. Vans get thrashed, therefore you don't see old vans on the road, simple as that. This van is just very lucky to have survived. It's probably suffered more in my use. But I like this van, and I like using it. I feel I should preserve it, I should be looking after it, it's survived this long. But I enjoy using it. There's always the possibility that my ownership may be its last.
The Bedford was the beginning of a new, tougher world for van makers. Increasingly competitive production methods signalled the end for Britain's smaller manufacturers. And as the old high streets changed from family businesses into national chains and supermarkets, it spelled the end for service from door to door.
Classic Trucks looks at some classic emergency vehicles next Tuesday at 8 o'clock. And the book Classic Trucks by Nicholas Faith is out now in most bookshops, price £16.99.
Okay, we'll do. Thank you. Okay, we're responding.
The Seagrave Tiller fire truck is one of the few vehicles where a backseat driver is welcome. The driver at the front and the tiller man at the rear manoeuvre the 54-foot-long truck through the densely packed streets of New York. For the firemen of 104 Brooklyn, the tiller truck is an essential piece of equipment that helps them save lives. John Rizzo is the tiller man.
You know, if we were going to the corner and we were going to turn right, the driver would turn the wheel that direction, I would go the opposite direction. We very rarely ever get stuck in intersections or any other place. We can sizzle, so we can get in much tighter spots.
Like all emergency vehicles, the tiller-driven fire truck was born out of necessity. It has evolved around the skyscrapers and grid-patterned streets of American cities. The success of a modern emergency vehicle is governed by two simple but precious concepts. Is it fast and agile enough to get to the scene of the emergency on time? And does it carry the right equipment to save lives? The earliest ambulances could hardly be called emergency vehicles at all. They were simply the collection and delivery vehicles of tragedy.
This is a W.G. Ducrot, built by Captain W.G. Ducrot, sometime between 1922 and 1926 at the Wandsworth Works. The engine in the vehicle is a Daimler Benz. This vehicle was mainly used for fever patients. So you'd have been taken with this vehicle to a fever hospital. If you didn't end up there, then you would end up on one of the boats on the River Thames. They took you down to one of the jetties and they took you out on a boat onto a fever ship. The charge for the ambulance then was at £0.50, 2 and 6pence. 12.5 pence now, but cost £0.50 then. When these guys were earning 12 shillings and 6pence a week, was a lot of money. Getting in and out is extremely difficult. In actual fact, the door only opens as wide as that. That's it. Now you've got to get in there, and if you're 6'2", you've got a problem. To open the side window, if you turn the handle, the window just keeps on going up and down. The other thing about it, of course, there's lots and lots of brass on this vehicle. Brass door handles, brass headlight, brass roof light, brass on the petrol cap, needed loads and loads of polishing. The coachwork, it's wood and metal, except for the roof. The roof is actually made of tarpaulin substance, which is made the same as the old aircraft years ago. It was stretched across the roof and weighted down and then doped until the roof was absolutely solid. You can actually walk on this roof even though it is canvas. It also had central heating. Today we have the paraffin heaters. This one was actually central heated from the engine, and the central heating pipes go right the way round the inside of the vehicle. We have had it running and used it, and it's quite warm in the back once you get it going.
The elegant lines of the coach-built Ducrot came from the era of the horse. Its predecessors in the London ambulance service were simply horse-drawn coaches for the sick. Early fire appliances were called fire engines because of the steam-driven pump mounted on the horse-drawn carriage with the fireman. The basic principles of firefighting have always been the same. You need a pump to put out the fire and a ladder or escape to rescue the victims. And you need to get there quickly. In the early days, firemen needed an extra dose of courage to ride on the outside of the fire engine, a tradition that carried on in the motor-driven fire engines of the 1930s.
Most of the fire engines before the war were these type here, where you stood outside on the ledge alongside the fire engine and hung on like grim death, because if you didn't, well, there were several firemen who had been injured and killed through being thrown off. You stood up in all weathers. I've seen firemen come back covered in snow like snowmen. But it was accepted as part of the job. We fancied ourselves, in my old brigade, we had brass helmets, plenty of brass buttons, and I suppose We stood as a pose on those engines of old days as we rode through the streets, feeling very, very glamorous, not half.
Despite its toy town appearance, this 1934 Leyland Cub could reach speeds of up to 50 miles an hour. With its own wheeled escape ladder and a pump that could deliver 500 gallons a minute, there was a real chance that if the alarm was raised in time, the fire might be extinguished and lives saved.
They used to have street fire alarms. They were posts dotted around the neighbourhood in street corners, which sent a signal into the watchroom here, showing where the fire alarm was pulled. It was one of those things where you broke the glass and pulled a knob. The only thing was they incited little boys to break the glass and pull the knob, and of course that was a false alarm.
In the days before superheroes and Nintendo, young boys dreamt about driving fire engines like this 1939 Leyland Tiger.
I do actually remember it going to fires as a young boy. You know, I used to watch it going along the streets, past my house. So I've had quite a long love affair with the vehicle. It's got an 8.8 litre Leyland petrol engine and it drives its own fire pump, which is a Gwyn. And the deliveries are here, and this is duplicated on the other side. This is capable of pumping water at the rate of 700 gallons per minute. On the top of the fire engine, we see the escape ladder, which is a 50-foot Merryweather. The braidwood body is really a traditional design of fire engine body that stems from the horse-drawn era. The men would sit on the side, and when they arrived at a fire, they would just jump off and get straight to work. It was deemed the sort of most quickest and efficient way of getting to work after arrival at a fire. But of course it was much more dangerous as well when motor vehicles' speeds increased. You know, this is capable of 60 miles an hour. So if somebody wasn't paying attention and they were going to a fire, they could easily get thrown off, and some did. Brass was used because it doesn't corrode like a lot of aluminium alloys. This blank cap just comes out as easy as anything, and this probably hasn't been removed for quite a long time now. It operates so nicely. It's also a tradition. You know, if you can polish it, then let's have it in the fire brigade.
The two air fire engines, they say, they were Leylands. One was an escape similar to this one here, and the other one was a pump. The life-saving appliance, which was the escape, went out first, followed by the pump. And when you got to, say it was an ordinary fire, you went to a fire hydrant and put a pipe in the ground, connected up your pump. Other firemen rolled out hose and directed the water onto the fire. Years ago, the fire hose wasn't rubber lined as it is now. It was only canvas. So when you first turned the water on, you had a wonderful display of water coming out of all kinds of little jets all over the place, and you got drenched before the hose settled down to become waterproof.
This 1938 Leyland Tiger is fitted with a 104-foot Metz ladder. Metz was a German company that made beautifully engineered turntable escape ladders that were far more advanced than the British wooden-wheeled escapes. Ironically, a year later, this same appliance was to fight fires in London's docklands caused by German bombs. Wallington was just one of hundreds of quiet suburban fire stations around London that was about to get very busy.
Here was an alcove where the sliding pole went down to the engine room.
That's right. That's how I'm trying to place that.
It was rather, as you know, Ivor, rather grim, because when you slid down that pole, you landed right in front of the fire engine.
Very true.
While most people believed there would be peace, the threat of war prompted the formation of the Auxiliary Fire Service. Volunteers like men's outfitter Ivor Morris found himself getting his hands dirty alongside full-time fireman Charles Gallahawk.
Before the war, they decided to increase the fire service for war purposes. And they recruited firemen from all walks of life round here.
Ken Bailey.
Morris Stiles. So many of them have gone on their last great call.
That's Eric Haywood.
Eric Haywood, yes, you should have become...
The undertrained and barely prepared AFS was soon to have a baptism of fire.
To these chappies who came in for the wartime, they did a wonderful job. Without any experience, the firemen, regular firemen, had never seen fires in their life like the fires during the war.
It's all worked out beautifully with the new Laguna.
New Argos catalogue, take one. Cut! 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 I said take one!
The new Argos catalogue is out now. To help you cope with the unexpected, our financial plans adapt. Ally Dunbar. For the life you don't yet know.
While the Blitz raged at night, in the daytime the ingenuity of the AFS volunteers turned all kinds of commandeered vehicles into makeshift fire appliances. It may look like Dad's army, but without these part-time firemen, the battle against the Blitz would have been lost.
Each local authority had to arrange the auxiliary fire service for their own needs and their own money, because the Home Office never granted them much money, so they had to use private cars, taxis, lorries and so forth to tow the trailer pumps.
But many of the vehicles were not up to the job.
There was a 3-ton Bedford, and somebody had unloaded that there, knowing it was rubbish, onto the corporation. And they've been so glad to get hold of anything, I suppose, at that time, that they accepted it, because it was clapped out.
Fortunately, Britain's early warning systems gave Reg Maxwell and the AFS men of Portsmouth time to get their clapped-out Bedford started.
You had a yellow alert, which meant to say Jerry had set off from home and was on his way over to England. You had a purple alert next, which said that he was coming your way, and then you had your red alert, which meant to say usually that he was over the top. When the yellow came through, you had to push this 3-ton Bedford up the length of the street, all of you, until it fired and you got it going, and then you brought it back. By that time, the purple had, if it was going to be a red, the purple had come through and the red had started, and you just connected up and went straight away on your rounds. You're not supposed to say these kind of things, but let's face the fact, and it happened to lots and lots of other people. You were absolutely terrified and scared, but you really enjoyed yourself. Hanging on the side of a car there with a trailer pump behind you, guns blazing, shrapnel falling and everything else, you had a vicarious thrill.
Thrilling it may have been, but so much was learnt in the Blitz that it became the birthplace of the modern fire service. In 1941, the formation of the National Fire Service meant that at last there was a nationwide firefighting force to await Hitler's doodlebugs and V-bombs. The equipment, like this Austin lorry and Guardian pump, was still rudimentary, but at least everything was painted the same colour, and firemen were firmly established as the heroes of suburbia. When the war came to a close, the National Fire Service was dissolved, and local authorities were once again in control.
Building a fire appliance is a specialized job done by specialized firms. Lives and property may depend on getting there without a hitch, and an Austin product never let...
Manufacturers like Austin were anxious to get in on the post-war spending boom and persuade county halls across Britain to buy their vehicles.
And this ambulance is another specialized vehicle with an Austin chassis.
London, being the largest and richest county council, designed and commissioned specialist vehicles. This Daimler ambulance was a conversion from a hearse. It was as much a part of the 50s as rationing.
This one was built in 1947. It continued in use right through until 1965. A large engine, 6-cylinder petrol, and of course being a Daimler it was fast, smooth, nice big bulbous tyres, low slung. When it was originally brought on the scene it bounced quite a lot on the back. So what they did, they put a 600 weight composite floor in the back to weigh the back down. And that made it very, very smooth. There was a little problem with that, was the fact that it had wire brakes. And consequently, with the weight, it wouldn't stop. So then they changed the brake into the servo system and problem solved. And even today, this one is still beautiful to drive.
The Daimler represents one of the great moments in British ambulance design. The next generation was a compromise. This 1958 Wandsworth was based on a sluggish Austin delivery van. With its fiberglass body, it had a veneer of modernity, but in reality was unstable and drafty. But resting in the corner of a workshop in North London is ambulance heaven, in the form of the ill-fated Sovam.
This is the Reeves Sovam ambulance. It was built in 1971-72 after the Ogle report. And the Ogle report said that an ambulance vehicle should be as a casualty on wheels. And if you look in the back of a modern day vehicle, you'll see that most of the equipment, style and stowage is made from this vehicle. It's strange actually, but it's got a wheel on each corner, unlike any other vehicle. The wheels are spread right at the back and right at the front, and the stretcher actually lays between the wheels. As far as the patients were concerned, it was excellent. The ride in the back is absolutely unbelievable. It cost something like about £36,000, and at that stage an ambulance was probably 8,000 or 9,000 in 1970-71. So this was a very expensive vehicle.
While it took the ambulance until the 1970s to reach its ultimate form, the fire engine had its golden age during the 60s. Nearly all the major commercial vehicle manufacturers became involved, with local authorities like Surrey producing their own bespoke coachwork.
This fire engine here is Dennis F24. It was brand new to Esher Fire Station in January 1961. And it remained there in service until 1974. It cost just over £4,000 when it was brand new, and I think you can call it good value for money. They had 17 years service out of it. It's a unique machine in as much that it was only 7'6" wide, it could go down the lanes, but it's very, very fast. It's as fast as your new fire engines are today.
A little like a Swiss Army knife, a classic fire engine hides a multitude of functions and useful tools.
It's got an electric bell and a hand bell, and we keep two-tone horns on it. This is the sub-officer's little side light for looking at the numbers of houses. Sub-officer would have sat in here, the driver the other side, and it would have run with a three-man crew in the back. So there's 5 firemen all together. In here was a hose locker. This is the old canvas type of hose. They used to hang it up in the towers when they'd been to a fire, dry it all out, and then roll it all up, scrub it and clean it, put it back on the machine. In this locker here, we have a Coventry Climax light portable pump. This is the Hillman engine, but it's a very powerful little pump. Hose reels are either side. It's got a Dennis 500 gun a minute pump on the back, and this is the days of a real fire engine. you'd hear these things coming down the road, the old bells ringing, and the firemen were all there with all the black gear, and as they went down the road, you'd normally see loads of kids going down the road, follow after it. You'd see a fire down the road, a grass fire or something, and there'd be 100 people standing there watching it. We're up to 40 mile an hour. We're going up to 50. We've got a nice straight road here. We're now going up nearly to 60 mile an hour. You can hear that engine roaring away. It's a 6.5 litre Rolls-Royce engine. One of the characteristics of this machine is when you were taking your foot off the throttle after a long run, you could stick your head out the window like this and you'd see a sheet of flame come straight out of the exhaust pipe. So you can imagine the oncoming traffic seeing a sheet of flame come out. That would frighten the life out of them. These were the first automatic fire engines that Surrey Fire Brigade had anyway. They were quite a new invention at the time. And the road holding was very good. Now we're carrying 400 gallons of water and the machine is fully stowed. You've got an all-up weight of about 7 tonnes. You have to think of read the road ahead all the time because you can't stop them. I do know that the lads used to love driving them. And when these got replaced by modern fire engines, they weren't very happy at all. They were a real fire engine as opposed to appliances today which all look the same. It just looks like a bread van really with a ladder on the roof.
Carmichael Cougar is definitely not a bread van with a ladder on the roof. A long way from a chip pan fire or even the Blitz, the aviation fire requires something special. An airport fire tender is expected to achieve a response time of 2 minutes. That's from leaving the station to extinguishing the fire. Any longer than this and it simply isn't worth them trying. Operated by just 2 men, with its 8-wheel drive and unofficial top speed of 100 miles an hour, the Cougar is the ultimate specialist emergency vehicle.
Nicholas Faith's book, Classic Trucks, costs £16.99 from bookshops.
The powder...
Near the Derbyshire village of Arkwright is one of Europe's most profitable coal mines. Instead of tunnelling through earth to find the precious coal seam, open cast mining tears away the surface to reveal it. One bite of this 600-ton excavator's shovel lifts 40 tons of rock and earth. 5 bites, and 2 minutes later, the skip of this American-built Caterpillar truck is full. Not having to travel on the public highway means that these mechanical wheelbarrows give a new meaning to the word big.
The bigger the excavator, the bigger the truck, the more efficient it is. It's the economies of scale as it is in so many things. And it's because you need to take vast volumes of waste material away, get the coal, and then bring it back again afterwards to fill the hole up.
Only when a man stands next to this metal monster do its vital statistics become truly apparent.
Well, what we have here is a 789 Caterpillar dump truck, capable of carrying 180 to 200 tons of material at one particular time, with a V16 cylinder engine in, 4 turbocharged, may I add, right, with a 69,000cc engine. Now that's really something else. I mean, take for instance, look at the size of the front grille here. That's the side of a bungalow, isn't it? I mean, behind there we have tucked in a great big radiator. I mean, gee, look at the tyres. Tyres alone. I mean, they're something else. They weigh 5 tons on the rims. Fuel tank. Now look at this here, fuel tank. It's like anybody's central heating tank. You know, we've got a truck here that uses 33 gallons of fuel an hour, an 800-gallon fuel tank. So, this is why we need the size of the tank for it to run most of the day. In here, would you like to come in with us? Look at the steering cylinders alone here, size of them. Steering linkages, stub axles, track rod ends, all very large stuff. All very large hydraulic hoses. It's very, very big, this truck. It's very exciting as well. You'll never get fed up of working on them, you know.
It might be exciting working with giant trucks, but it can create giant problems.
Obviously there are limits in the actual structure and the engineering and that. That's not too big a problem. One big problem is the tyres. The technology of actually making bigger tyres, and actually not just making them but transporting them. If you make a big tyre, you can't cut it in pieces and carry bits of tyre and stick it together. You can do that with a truck, like a piece of Meccano, but not a tyre. You've got to carry the whole thing.
They're quite expensive. They're in the region of £12,000 onwards. So if you add the 6 together, you've got £70,000 plus of tyres on this truck. So there's quite a responsibility alone in tyres for the driver.
As he could run over a Land Rover without feeling more than a slight bump, the tyres are usually the least of the driver's worries. In fact, handling these million-pound monsters requires surprisingly little effort. With power steering and a 6-speed automatic gearbox, the Cat is as easy to drive as a car. A car that is 25 feet wide, 40 feet long, and 18 feet high. To carry and tip a 180-ton load with such consummate ease, you need some serious hydraulic muscle.
There's a common system on here with the hydraulic rams. You see the size of those? They're like the Queen Elizabeth exhaust stacks. They run through the brake systems as well. The brake system is common oil to the hoist oil. This is the reason why we've got such a large tank.
In contrast to the colossal earth moving by the dump trucks, the final extraction of the coal is more like digging up the high street. Small excavators and men with brushes and shovels sweep away the last of the mud and rock from the exposed seam, allowing the coal to be dug up.
In theory, you can go bigger, and it's pretty certain that by the end of this century, you will have trucks carrying around 300 tons and excavators big enough to load them in 3 passes, i.e. 3 bucketfuls fills a 300-ton truck, so that's 100 tons per bucketful, and then the truck's away.
Trapped by their size, dump trucks rarely leave sight. Dismemberment is their only escape. But even stripped of its skip and wheels, the carcass of this caterpillar weighs 70 tons, and so remains in the outsize world of an abnormal load. Today, with Britain's sophisticated motorway network, loads like this have become routine. The type of lorry that hauls the cat is the heaviest version of a road-going juggernaut. But it wasn't always this easy. In the late 50s, Britain was building vast components for heavy industry. To get them from the factory to the building site, powerful lorries like these Scammell 80-tonners slogged huge trailers along trunk roads.
The work of dozens of men and months of planning lie behind this strange journey. It is almost a year since monthly meetings started to discuss the multitude of details which must be dealt with. And up to the last minute, an air of dramatic uncertainty persisted.
In January 1957, this 130-foot stainless steel tower for ICI was the longest load ever to go by road. It took 3 days to travel 18 miles.
Even policemen are dwarfed to Lilliputian dimensions as the steady crawl goes on through the houses of Middlesbrough. To these men, strange loads, great responsibility and weather of all kinds are just part of the job. Bob Watson of Glasgow has just been moving 200-ton atomic power units at Calder Hall. Wet or fine, light or dark, the lumbering progress must go on until the appointed place is reached.
The relics of this epic era in heavy haulage now lie in a field in Northamptonshire.
I've always had a love affair with these Scammells. We got a bit excited at the beginning, I suppose, and put the cart before the horse, so to speak, and instead of buying one, restoring it and having an ongoing situation, we rushed off out and we now own about 30 of them, I think. Not all for preservation, lots of them are for donor vehicles. If you find a rusting old chassis somewhere for a few quid, then you buy it, put it up the corner, and hopefully you can scavenge from that to keep some of the others going. This Scammell here is a super constructor. It was built about 1950, I would imagine. We haven't got a specific date for it. It started off life in the military as a tank transporter. After that, it went into private hands. When these lorries were on the road, they were without a doubt the best that there were. In fact, if anything, they were vastly over-engineered. And that made them a very durable machine. The technology, I suppose, was top hole for the day.
This 190-ton transformer was top hole technology too. The power industry promised to meet the demand for cheap electricity through the economies of scale gained by using massive electrical components. Heavy hauliers like Pickford's met this challenge by using sophisticated new types of multi-axle trailer. To haul it to Clydesmill for Scottish Electricity took 3 of Scammell's finest prime movers, the 6-wheel drive Super Constructor.
When you change gear, you can change gear when that gearbox is ready to let you change gear. So your whole being has to slow down. You can't hurry the old girl. I mean, flat out she'll only do 27 mile an hour, and it's great. Very therapeutic, I think. I don't wave a big Union Jack, but I do like things that are British, and Scammell in particular. Unfortunately, they went the way of most British industries, and they just sat back and said, we are the best, and you take us or you leave us. And unfortunately, most people started to leave them.
Yeah.
And how much are they asking for it?
15,000.
This pub in Newport, South Wales, is the monthly meeting place for a group of heavy haulage veterans. They all work for Wins, who started in transport in 1863 with a cart and 2 horses.
Castle Bromwich. Right. Brownhills, Stafford.
People are always impressed by a big load passing in the streets, and I think it gave the drivers a little bit of, well, you know, we're better than the ordinary construction and use vehicles.
Easy to use this, he runs about.
These ex-Wins men are watching the home movies of former director John Wynne.
We were able to allow the manufacturers to build as big as they could, because we were able to say, yes, you can move it. Sometimes you think to yourself, well, I wish I hadn't said that they could move it, but that was part of the game.
Wins had a motto: if it's loose at both ends, we will move it. And that lasted for over 100 years. There was never a problem with moving anything for anybody, as long as they were prepared to pay for it. That was the... And Wins, all the Wins men accepted a challenge. They loved the challenge.
The challenge for a Wins man came in matching the management's enthusiasm for taking on any job. By shifting the apparently impossible, the drivers truly became kings of the road. In the pre-motorway age, getting these spectacular loads through narrow streets and along country lanes took a phenomenal amount of judgment and skill. The art lay in the teamwork between the drivers at the front and the steersman at the back.
When you're a back tractor driver, you are basically a motorised bogie. You are fixed to the back of the trailer. You have no part to play in the steering of your tractor or the trailer, other than in difficult circumstances. You have to start at the back, and you have to understand the back, so that when eventually you do become a front tractor driver, you know exactly what the man at the back has to do, and you have to make allowances as regards. You can't go tearing down a road at 20 miles an hour expecting him to steer the back bogie at 5 miles an hour. You have to drop your speed, correspond, and make all the allowances for him to manoeuvre that back bogie.
This is one of the many Diamond T's owned by Wins. They came to Britain with the American Army to transport their tanks and never went home. The Diamond T's power and its simple construction held great appeal for entrepreneurs like the Wins.
Can you drive a Diamond T? So I said, well, I expect so. What did it look like? And he took me around a corner of the yard, and there was this colossal vehicle, left-hand drive, I don't know how many gear levers. And he said, what about it? I said, well, yeah, they're all the same, I expect so. So he told me what he thought of me in no uncertain terms, saying that he had men that had worked for him for 25 years would give their right arm for the opportunity of driving such a vehicle. It was a superb vehicle, grossly underrated, and Wins really got their money out of them.
The purchase of war surplus Diamond T's was the inspiration of John Wynne's Uncle Perce, or HP as he was known.
Apparently HP had been driving up from Cardiff and following a convoy of tank transporters, American Diamond T's. And one of them had to brake, the one that he was following had to brake hard. And there it was, 8 black lines on the road, which it was absolutely inconceivable for HP, who had been in transport all his life, to see these brakes, because we did not know what brakes were. And that sort of set his mind to thinking, well, after the war we'll have to get all of these. And we did. We eventually landed up with about 30 Diamond T's, plus the Pacifics, which was the mainstay of our heavy haulage fleet. We had 6 of those, which HP again bought at the right price from a field in Kent, 6 out of 100. The other 94 were cut up, unfortunately, for scrap.
At a time when the equivalent Scamell cost around £6,000, the Pacifics at £120 a time were clearly a bargain.
Well, the Pacific, it wasn't so much enjoying the Pacific. You were somebody to drive a Pacific. It was like driving a house. They were, I think they were about 15 feet wide, about 15 feet high. The engine ran alongside you at shoulder height, the full length of the cab, and you sat in a small seat with two windows that were like shop windows. So all day long you had the sun beating in, you had the heat from this terrible engine, you couldn't smoke, you could hardly breathe, you had one little window on the side that opened, you were stripped to the waist, and the sweat poured down your face, through your eyebrows, off your chin, dripped on your chest and ran down your belly. No, they weren't nice to drive when they were really working. But it was, you did have a sense of achievement in being allowed to drive a Pacific. They were a fantastic tractor.
The success of civilian heavy haulage could never have happened without the development of equipment for the army. In the old days, military equipment was always built up to a standard and never down to a cost. The Scammell Explorer, with its hugely articulating suspension and distinctive coffee pot radiator, was the pinnacle of Scammell's achievement in building an all-terrain vehicle. Its six-wheel drive and off-road capabilities made it ideal for hauling heavy military hardware. Anywhere. Tanks need a special kind of transport.
The A vehicles, that's the tanks, the other track vehicles such as Warrior, the heavy guns, require to arrive at the battle area in the best possible condition. They're designed to manoeuvre quickly around and tactically around the battlefield area, such as the tanks moving into fire positions. And they're not designed to drive for long distances on the roads for sort of hundreds of miles. That's where the tank transporters come in, to provide strategic mobility for the tanks.
One of Scammell's greatest rivals was the Hampshire-based company of Thornycroft.
It's a 1954 Thornycroft Antar, built in Basingstoke. The word Antar, we believe, is named after a warrior. The actual engine is a Meteorite 8-cylinder engine, developing 285 horsepower at a maximum of 2,000 revs per minute. Obviously not all tanks that load onto the trailer are going to run. Some, for some reason, have either been battle damaged or the engines have gone whatever, so this incorporates a winch, a straight pull. Well, it's 50 ton, but a 2 to 1 is 100 ton, which is more than enough for bringing tanks onto this trailer where it's designed for. The trailer itself is 1954, same as the Antar. It's a 50 ton Dyson trailer. As you see, it's got 32 wheels, which equals 32 tyres, an awful lot of maintenance, so you always find that a lot of the inner tyres, of course, people forget to pump them up or to check them, so any tyre's going to go, it's always the inner tyre that goes. You get a flat tyre, middle of nowhere, you haven't got the AA or the RAC to come and collect you, so therefore you've got your own tyre inflator, the compressor's running with the engine running, you've got enough air there, you then go around with your tyre inflator, do all your tyres, not a problem at all. You then see here the nameplate for the vehicle, tractor 6x4. So obviously 6x4, there's no front wheel drive, so cross-country capability of this particular vehicle is hopeless. Just do not go off-road with these vehicles, it won't work. Driving on the road is a nightmare. I mean, besides the fact that the public sort of try and overtake you, undertake you, the gearing's so slow, it's so wide, the mirrors are so far out, it is a nightmare to drive, so I don't recommend it, not as a fun vehicle anyway. Driving the Antar was a very challenging task indeed. Because it was a manual gearbox, you always had something to do all the time, and it kept you awake, you never got tired, because you always would need to change up, because the maximum speed was 28 miles per hour. Because sometimes you had tight bends, it took 2 years to actually turn the steering wheel to get round various corners and junctions and hazards, where in today's Scammell Commander, you only, with it being powered steering, you can get round so easier. You're not even really driving the vehicle, it drives itself as such.
These commanders are the last to bear the legendary name of Scammell. It is difficult to kill a monster, and monster trucks are no exception. They operate in a secret world, lumbering through the night, hidden away from the public view. Many prime mover tractors are resurrected to lead new lives, some in showbiz. It is the showman's ingenuity that helps preserve the name of Scammell.
So Scammell had an idea back in, I believe it was 37, 38, to put a dynamo onto a lorry. So they presented it to a man called John Oldley from up in the northeast, and he travelled it with a big wheel and a moon rocket. They found that was successful, so then Scammell then produced 18. Lots more showmen saw them, and being ingenious people decided that they could make them for maybe a quarter of that price. So Scammell never actually made any more than the 18 because the showmen were all busy making copies. You can see from looking at it, it's not a particularly big motor, but when you see them coming down the road with maybe two 20-25 foot trailers on, and then a 25-30 foot living wagon behind that with an all up length of 100 foot, and she just chugs along there, and she just enjoys being busy, I think. And you can hear that Gardner chugging away as well, and it's really nice.
The great British company of Scammell is dead, but the name and the legend will live on.
And the greatest pleasure I get from it, I think, is when they pull the fair down at midnight, and then I'll finally get in the lorry at 12:01, have a 3.5 hour journey back at 27 miles an hour. You're all on your own, there's no traffic, and it's just a lovely feeling. It just slows you right down, and you can enjoy it. To somebody who hasn't driven one, they really wouldn't know what I was on about.
Well, that was the last in the series, but for a high-octane read, the Classic Trucks book is out now, priced at £16.99.